Have you ever had a cow not breed back? We're going to help fix that today. First of all, we're going to learn about which tools are best for pregnancy checking in your operation. But we're also going to learn what makes your cattle herd reproductively efficient or reproductively inefficient. Is it genetics? Is it management? Or is it hybrid vigor? Well, that's what we're going to learn about today in this interview with Dr. Joe Mask. Infinity Cattle Services, owned by Chris Shivers, is glad to be a sponsor of the Cattle Innovation Station podcast. Infinity Cattle Services, a unique, vision-driven, service-oriented company committed to developing successful revenue-producing cattle operations, is a full-service consulting and marketing firm specializing in Brahman and Brahman-influenced cattle. Contact them today to learn more about how they can assist you with locating cattle, cattle mating, sale management, marketing, communications, record keeping, data submission, and a wide array of other services. They can be reached at 713-202-1747. Again, that's 713-202-1747, or at infinitycattleservices@gmail.com. That is infinitycattleservices@gmail.com. Visit their website at infinitycattle.com or check them out on Facebook and Instagram. It's time for another episode of the Cattle Innovation Station podcast, where we keep you current on beef cattle industry events, help you innovate your herd to turn a profit, and help innovate the beef cattle industry so we can feed more people on less land. I'm your host, Baxter Whitworth, and today I'm interviewing Dr. Joe Mask. Dr. Mask, what can we expect to kind of learn more about today?
Well, I think Baxter, we've kind of been talking about reproductive efficiency and how do we use different technologies. And I think that, today we're going to talk about other tools that we have in our toolbox, and then maybe even get into some management versus genetics, or maybe hybrid vigor as well.
Yes, sir. So, when we talk about reproductive tools, a lot of times what surfaces to our mind is, like we talked about in the last episode, AI, IVF, ET, and those are all very important tools that we can use. But the tools I want to talk about right now are the tools that just help us manage our cattle better from a reproduction standpoint. And so, what I want to start off with is talking about better ways to pregnancy check our cattle. So, what are some tools that uh, new or maybe even not so new that are great ways to pregnancy check cattle, and versus kind of the tools or practices that we could also be using from a more manual standpoint?
Baxter, one of the things that we have is rectal palpation. That's the one that we've been using for a long time. And, basically we go in the rectum of the female, and we feel through the rectal genital pouch down into the repro tract of that female to determine pregnancy, and there's veterinarians out there, and there's repro techs out there, and palpation techs that, sometimes, 45 days to 60 days or so, some even a little better than that, of getting some of these cows, caught, whether they're bred or open. I think palpation is one that's been cost effective for years. It's been reliable. But now with the technology of ultrasound, we can do so much more. We can do things a lot closer to time of insemination. We can even sex these fetuses as well using ultrasound technology. And so I think that, I was visiting with a gentleman that I work with yesterday, because I'm fortunate enough to have one ultrasound machine here that I use. Plus, I've got another one coming, a newer machine that's actually has some Doppler capability of looking at blood flow through Doppler, and to look at some of these follicles and different things. But now we're getting down to about 30 days, 35 days. Being able to tell if these animals are bred, and that early detection means a lot. Especially if they're open, we can run those cows back through and try to, if we want to try to AI them one more time, or we just want to put them with a bull for cleanup. And then we can, like I said, we can determine fetal age. We can determine, the fetal sex at that time as well. So, the earlier diagnosis of pregnancy, I think, gives us the ability now with that ultrasound is to make, hard decisions. Do we need to cull that cow? Do we need to try to rebreed her? And I think, with the cost of it, it's also a cost savings because, there's been a time where we still know that there's early embryonic death loss in utero. We know that those cows will reabsorb. We know that those issues are there. But if we can make decisions of getting that, that open cow, maybe we move her to another breeding season. If she's a spring calf, we move her to the fall or vice versa. Or we just try to say, hey, we've tried long enough and now it's just time to maybe cut our losses. With the cost of cell-born cows today and cull cows, it's a little easier to haul them to town. But I think it's the cost savings by using those technologies, especially when we, we figured it out a lot earlier.
Yes, sir. So, you talked about ultrasound and you talked about doing the palpation. What about doing the blood testing? Is that a good tool to use?
Great question, Baxter. And that's one that I think that, more people ought to be using because the reliability of looking at, those cows being bred, using, blood at 30 days. You could bleed those cows just as easy as you could do anything. And then in 20 minutes, you've got result. And so chute side diagnosis helps out on people that maybe they don't have the capability or the know-how to do rectal palpation, or they don't have an expensive ultrasound machine at their disposal. I will tell you that, there's times that if I'm uncertain, especially if I'm just going to do a rectal palpation, if I'm uncertain, I might pull blood and do a blood test as well because I keep them on hand because I think they're that reliable. And so, the technology is getting better and better. And once again, that gives us the opportunity that we don't have to haul cows to the cell barn or haul cows to the veterinarian to check. But I will say, Baxter, the one thing that it does do or adds to it is to make sure that we've got really good facilities. Because at the end of the day, it's all about animal welfare and it's all about us. And so we need to be protected. We need to make sure before we do any of this, and that's maybe something we didn't even talk about the last time we were talking about AI or ET or IVF, is that we've got to have good facilities, good chutes, good working pens, to make sure that, we're kind of covering that animal when it comes to the animal welfare side, but then to make sure that we're safe as well. And so I think that's, all three of those are great ways of determining pregnancy.
Yes, sir. So we've talked about determining pregnancy with with those three technologies or techniques that we just talked about. But what about detecting estrus? So I know that a popular tool is estrus patches. What are your thoughts on that? And when should a producer use those, and when is it maybe not necessary?
Well, Baxter, I've grown, I guess, since I've been doing this since the early 90s. We've seen a lot of things from a lot of different types of patches that we've used that, had a capsule in there and it would blow them out so many times. And, that capsule would break and, they would be red. It's called a Kmart patch. And then we went to these Estrotech patches, this kind of the lottery style scratch off tags. Now, like I said, other than that, we've got some electronic patches that you've got a base station. It kind of picks up when that cow, is being ridden as well for that. And I would tell you that the use of patches is really good when we're trying to use AI programs. If we want to do, you know, estrus detection and AI those cows 12 hours after the onset of estrus, an estrus tag is great. I think that if we have minimal or marginal labor And in most people nowadays that have cows have jobs in town, or they're doing something totally different. They're not at the ranch all the time, or maybe they're maybe they have another either cutting hay, or they're shredding pasture when they're trying to catch heats as well. I think those estrus type patches or ear tags that we can use are great for that, and I think that gives us the ability to know when those cattle are in estrus. But once again, we've got to check them. I think they're a really good source is when young people have show heifers and they're trying to get them bred, and they're in a school barn, or they're, at somebody's place that they're not being able to watch them while they're in school all day long. The Estrotech patches are great for that, because it gives us the ability to know what that cow's doing when we're not around. You know, I would tell you that if we're going to use like a strict timed AI program, if we're going to just time AI those cows after we sync them up, Estrotech patches are not all that, they're not that useful to us. So I wouldn't, utilize them on cows if I'm going to just time AI. I've got a student that's got a project right now that we're using some different protocols, and some of those cows will be bred on estrus, and some of them will be bred timed. And so those timed AI cows, I will not instruct her, or will not, it's not part of the protocol to put Estrotech patches on. And so, if we're trying to catch them in estrus and breed them, 12 hours after the onset, or a little later, that 18 to 21 hours or so on sex semen, I think they're great to use. But if we're using timed AI, I don't know if they're really that useful.
Have you been looking for a place to buy top quality AI sire semen or collectible of your own? Well, look no further than Elgin Breeding Services. Located in Elgin, Texas, Elgin Breeding Service is not only one of the best breeding services in the business, but also has superior customer service. Contact them at ebsbull@elginbreedingservices.com or by phone at 512-285-2019. Again, that's 512-285-2019. And visit their website at elginbreedingservice.com. Have you been looking for Brahman cattle with a good genetic background? Contact 79 Cattle Company, selling reliable Brahman replacement heifers, Brahman show prospects, and Brahman bulls. Contact Taylor Tate at 210-241-4511. Again, that's 210-241-4511. Or contact Mallory Tate at 210-861-0155, 210-861-0155.
Yes, sir. That makes sense, and I think that's a great way to use it and not waste the money of having to spend it or use it when you don't have to. But I do have a question about using it on natural service. Okay. Is it of any benefit to use it on natural service so that you can know when that bull might have bred the cow, or is that really not necessary?
I think it goes back to that management decision. If you're not there and you're trying to see when the bull's breeding cows, or if old Bessie got bred or what have you, I think it's okay to use. I don't think they're cost prohibitive, to use those patches. But I think it goes back to, do we have the facility, or is that cow gentle enough that I can put the patch on correctly? And then, am I going to watch them? And so, I think it goes back to, management again, is what decisions that needs to be made. And then, what your operation calls for. I know that, we might visit, or you might want to visit a little later, or something even about breeding seasons. But, we're trying to really hone in and tighten up our breeding season. That even helps, with those bull bred cows, where you kind of know prior to palpation which cows the bull did cover.
Yes, sir. All right. Well, before we move on to something else, is there any other technologies from a reproduction management standpoint that we need to be aware of that can help us be more profitable?
As far as technologies, I think we've covered a lot of them, the ones that are out there. I think that, some of those things that we really need to look into, and I think that we really need to start, all of us need to be thinking about it when we talk about reproductive tools. The cedar implants, that's another one, of how do we get the estrus synchronization, really utilizing the timed AI protocols or some of those protocols that, fit us, and we can kind of set those cows up when we're going to be around, or maybe when you're on vacation, or maybe when your AI tech can get there. We talked about ultrasound. I think that's, you know, um, one of those tools that, if you have the capability of using it, it really tells you some things. Other things that we can use that, that especially when we talk about breeding, is one of those tools is genomic testing. I think that, we have got to get away from, just looking at common EPDs to look at more genomically enhanced EPDs, especially on these younger bulls. We're not having to wait a long time to see what that bull can produce. If we're using genomics, we're going to get a lot more data. And so I think that we're in a data-driven world today, especially in the cow business. And how do we improve genetics? And I think some of those tools are going to help us. But I think that we also have to know that all of these are tools, and it's going to go back to management. It's going to go back to profitability. And, what we said earlier is match the technology and the tools that you have for your operation goals. Um, and I think at the end of the day, we're all seeing higher cost, higher prices in the sale barns, higher prices on seed stock cattle. Um, However, we're seeing higher input costs as well. And so how do we leverage those different technologies to face the goals or to reach the goals that we want?
Yes, sir. So you've said this numerous times, but an open cow is extremely costly to your operation, and a cow or and reproduction is the baseline of a cow calf operation's profitability, because without that there is no product for them to sell. So when it comes to cattle that are reproductively efficient, um how does management impact their reproductive success? Uh,
I think it's a great question, Baxter, and I think that those are the things that sometimes we forget about. But when I look at management impacts, the first one that I look at is nutrition, and I think that's one of the biggest drivers that we have when we talk about reproductive efficiency. Open cow is an open cow, but why is she open? Number one, what is her body conditions for? I think we really need to hone in and understand the difference in the body condition score system of 1 to 9, knowing that we need to be somewhere in that 5 or 6 on most cows. And, we know that there's going to be situations that cows are going to get down to that 4, and there's going to be situations the cow gets to 7. The thing is, I think the management side of it is how do we manage those females? I would tell you that I still think that most of our time should be put with the female. When I talk about managing that female, is we have 3 different types of females that we manage, or I manage, at least on our place, and I think a lot of people will manage some of these. We have to manage weanling heifers. We have to manage breeding age heifers. We have to manage dry cows, and we have to manage wet cows. And so, and then we have to manage, those cows throughout the year. And so, how do we put them in different places? Because those growing heifers, those weanling heifers, and those long yearlings that are ready to be bred, they take different management than a dry cow does. Those dry cows take different management protocols than a wet cow does. It's got a calf at her side and bred back. And so we need to make sure, and this is just, kind of the gold standard, I guess, is, those cattle need to be somewhere in that 2.5% of their body weight a day of feed to kind of maintain those cattle. And I think that we've got to make sure that one thing that we do as far as nutrition is really understand in the wintertime, what hay are we feeding? I hear people all the time talk about, well, I buy my hay by the roll, or I buy my hay by the square. Well, that's fine. But what's the nutritional value of that hay? Okay. Not every hay bale is the same. So if you've got, hay that looks really pretty and you tested it's at 2% protein, well, how do we maintain body condition score? Well, we've got to put out more cubes. We got to put out more lick. We got to put out more tubs. And so, I would say that, sometimes it's better that if we would start thinking about we buy hay by the ton and by the analysis of it. We don't do that. But a bale of hay that costs you, let's just use the example of $100 just for easy figuring. If that $100 bale of hay is 2% protein versus a $100 bale of hay that's 16% protein, well, it costs me a lot less money to feed that 16% protein hay because I'm not having to add extra supplementation in the wintertime. And so, nutrition and body conditions for it, I think, are paramount in this deal. I think sometimes that we are our own worst enemy when it comes to the nutrition on show cattle. I think we get them too fat as babies sometimes, and then we have reproductive issues of trying to get them bred. And so we really got to manage those cattle as well. Plus, those first calf heifers. Managing them when they're in that third trimester of pregnancy, that we're not feeding them too much because that's the most optimum time of that calf growing in that last trimester. To be where the calf is not growing in excess. But then how do we keep that cow in the condition that she needs to be, as we talked earlier about those calving intervals, being that 45 to 60 days or so after postpartum, that those cattle will get rebred. And so management, when it comes to that, I think is important. I think the other part is that we all need to have a relationship, what we call a veterinary client-patient relationship, a VCPR, with a veterinarian to go through, our health protocols, our vaccination protocols, our parasite control. What do we need to be doing? And I think that goes back to management too, is to, there's some products out there that you can't use on bred females and so how do we manage those cows to a point where the vaccinations that we're using, the clostridials, the respiratories, or the reproductive vaccinations we're using, plus parasite control, how does that fit in? And then, I think the last part of it is basically that bull management. How do we manage those bulls that we're using? I don't know if we'll talk about it later, but I'm bringing it up just shortly here, but breeding soundness exams, very important, and I'm not concerned so much. Sometimes I know we can look at the motility and morphology of sperm cells under a scope and see what they're doing. And we can look at volume and we can look at concentration. However, are we looking at feet and legs? Are we looking at, the bull has a corn, or a bull has a broke toe, or a bull has, if he's not extending himself, does he have an issue, like with his genitalia? Does he have an eye issue? And so I think that, bull management's another one of those things that's key when it comes to management. And I will tell you that, just in my opinion, Baxter, that poor management when it comes to what we do destroys our reproductive efficiency and our reproductive potential. We can do that pretty quickly. And, I've been in situations where I palpated cows and they're open, and then I hear excuses, or well, she's open because I did this or I did that. And I think that really rings true, that we can destroy our reproductive potential pretty quick just on our management style.
EP Cattle Company. Owned by Eddie Wilson, EP Cattle Company is home of Sir Rao's Handshake. Rao's Handshake is a sound-structured, heavy-muscled bull that is really bold-ribbed. So it comes with no surprise that he is a Fort Worth and San Antonio Junior Show Division Champion and Rio Grande Valley Open Show Division Champion. He is a grandson of BRC Noble and JDH Shank Manso, and is also a great-grandson of Mr. H. Elijah Manso. You can contact Eddie Wilson or Nicole Wilson on Facebook at EP Cattle Company. So remember, if you're looking for some well-performing, registered Brahman genetics, contact Eddie Wilson on Facebook.
Are you looking for high-quality hay that is priced well? Then make sure to visit Threadgill Hay Company. They have fertilized horse jigs and Tifton 85. They carry square bales and round bales. Their square bales are $8 a bale, and their 4x6 round bales are $50 per roll. That's a nice price and good quality. They're located outside of Mount Enterprise, Texas, and they will gladly give you more details when you contact them. Speaking of contacting them, you can reach out by texting Sawyer Poole at 903-646-4741 or Ronald Threadgill at 903-235-2011.
Yes, sir. So there's a lot to break down there. I want to start with nutrition. Like we mentioned earlier, a cow that's being profitable is going to be carrying at least or feeding at least two animals at one time. Her and whether that be a calf that she's carrying or a calf on side, she should be feeding at least two, if not three, when she's weaning or getting closer to weaning her calf on side and already being bred back. So how do we manage that nutrition, knowing that we're likely feeding at least two, hopefully, cattle or two animals when we're feeding that one cow?
Well, I think, Baxter, the first thing that we have to realize is we cannot be overstocked. We cannot be overgrazed with what the good Lord gives us, and that's grass. We have to manage our pastures to be able to manage that cow. Cows are ruminants. They need forage. They need forage, and they need forage for microbe, from the gut. They need to be somewhere on a whatever percentage protein or fat that your land requires. And I think that that's an open-ended question because it goes back to what forage availability do we have? And so, I think that's the biggest thing. I've heard it said many a time, and I don't know who I heard it from the first time, Baxter. I wish I did because I'd give him credit that, the most profitable cowman is first a grass farmer. When he knows how to provide grass and grow grass and forage for his cow, that's the least input he has. However, saying that is it's not the least input because we have to do soil sampling of our pastures. We've got to do fertilization of our pastures. Maybe we need to aerate and open up that soil of our pasture. But grass is number one, and we cannot keep going to the point, we'll just feed them in hay or we'll feed that to them. They need that green forage. And so I would say all that goes back to if it's 12% protein feed, that's 2.5% fat or whatever it might be, it has to go back to what forage availability do we have first?
Yes, sir. Well, that's great. And like you said, management really does probably play the biggest role into reproductive efficiency. But I want to talk about the other well-known part of reproductive efficiency, which is the genetics side of it. And so what is genetics? How much of a role does that play in reproductive efficiency? And how heritable is it? And how do we need to make sure that our cattle are genetically set up to be reproductively efficient?
Well, I think I think the biggest thing is we need to plan for the next generation, and we've got to figure out, how do we change that? So we start looking at, fertility traits like heifer pregnancy and stability in the herd. We want those females that will reach the age of puberty earlier. We know that those cattle that reach the age of puberty earlier will breed earlier, and stay in the herd longer because, they're going to be producing. Now, I will tell you that there's, I think you have to look at breed type as well. Not every animal is going to come into estrus or going to come, reach the age of puberty at the same time. But I think if we can look at those traits and we can look at, start looking at our bulls, testicular growth, we can look at scrotal circumference on those bulls, and we know that's a direct correlation to the age of puberty in these heifers. And so I think when we start to look at those different types of traits, that helps us. I think that we also have to understand that, we need longevity. And I think we have indexes in EPDs and most breeds that look at, those longevities, those efficiency indexes, that the stabilities, the daughter queens, the daughter, cow, or whatever those might be, and really start to look at the genetic side. Genetics to me, in trying to teach animal breeding and genetics here, genetics is a long-term process. We're not getting from A to Z overnight in the beef industry, because it takes a long time to see genetic change. But if we work on it and we stay consistent, I think we can do a better job. And the biggest thing is really understanding your EPDs, trying to utilize genomics to enhance those EPDs and the genetic impact of the cow, and then to learn from mentors. Not everybody's going to know everything about genetics or animal breeding, but I will tell you, Baxter, one thing that impressed me, and when I first met you, and it's been a long time ago, that you were willing to go up to people 3 times your age and ask them questions about breeding and what would their bull add, or what would this cow add. And I think that those mentorships that we have in our life, and I've had a lot of them, that have helped me understand EPDs and what really we need to look at, kind of, improve the bottom line of the cow herd when we start to look at that.
Yes, sir. I think that's great, because obviously, like you mentioned, we have to manage the cattle well, but if the cattle aren't reproductively efficient themselves, that's not gonna matter much. But another thing that does go along with genetics, but a lot of people don't think about when it comes to reproductive efficiency, is hybrid vigor. And when you hear the word hybrid vigor, you think of out or crossing a Brahmin with a Angus or a Hereford, or other different breeds with each other to create hybrid vigor. But even within breeds, doing outsourcing or outcrossing genetics with other cattle that have been many generations removed, that don't have much genetic similarity, can create hybrid vigor. So how does hybrid vigor play a role in reproductive efficiency, and how can you implement strategies in your herd to use it?
But I think you're right on target. We think hybrid vigor heterosis. We think about that F1 cross, and as my time is at ABBA, I saw a sign every morning that said common denominator, which was that Brahmin crossing back on these F1 females and true F1s, and there's nothing out there that I think that we get more. But it's not just Bos Indicus versus on Bos Taurus. It could be Bos Taurus on Bos Taurus. And like you said, it can be in your own herd using outside genetics. And I think those situations, we increase fertility, we increase longevity, we increase calf survivability as well. Because I think all of us can utilize outside genetics in our herd. There are some closed herds, and I understand that, and I'm not against any closed herds, and I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with that. But to get optimum heterosis, I think you've got to use some outside genetics in your herd to improve the things that you don't already have. I will tell you, you come to our place, and I'm saying my wife and I and Jennifer's place is, we produce females. We don't produce good bulls because we don't have the type of cows that, we concentrate more on the female side of things. However, we have used bulls when we want to dabble a little bit in the market steer game or something like that. So I think bringing in those outside genetics help us in that. If we've got a group of cows that are decent, and let's see, EPD for maternal milk, And that's not about how much milk they're going to produce, but how many pounds of those weaned calves. Well, then I could go outside and get another bull that maybe, can strengthen my cow herd up in that next generation of heifers. And so I think that we always have to be looking at that, um, and especially in a commercial herd. I think the biggest return on investment is when we utilize, cattle that we can get heterosis out of. I was talking to some people this morning about some bulls that, and these are, F1 bulls to increase that. And so, hybrid vigor is something that, we can, I think that by using outside genetics or by using F1 females or producing F1 type cattle or F2 type cattle, we improve the lifetime productivity of our whole herd. If we stay with that same concept of just using our own bulls back on our own females, I don't know if we get as much productivity out of them. And so sometimes I think we can even get a little stale. And so that's that's how I would think hybrid vigor really work in most operations.
Yes, sir. So I think we've had a great talk about making the different factors that play into making cattle reproductively efficient. But if someone is having a tough time and they're struggling with reproductive efficiency in their herd, they're lacking um, quality conception rates. What should they kind of do to find out what's going wrong? Should they try generation of bringing in completely outcropped genetics to see if that helps, or should they really cull hard to see if it's actually the genetics of that animal, or maybe try different management strategies? How should they start off trying to figure out what they're doing, what's not working for their operation?
Baxter, I think we need to really combine all three. I think we need to combine management with genetics and then with heterosis or hybrid vigor to really figure out how do we become profitable. And I would tell you that the people that I consult with and have consulted with across the U.S. on different operations is that we can make immediate impact by just changing management strategies. We can make immediate impacts by that. Those management strategies of number one, getting those cows vaccinated on time, getting them dewormed on time, getting them fed the right nutrition. We can make immediate changes if we just think about that. A lot of times I think that we get complacent. The cows are making money, this, that, and the other. But I will tell you that where we're at today, and with the cattle industry like it is today in short numbers, cattle prices are high. If we make, some of these management decisions just to maybe start using AI or maybe start using a different mineral protocol or what have you, I think that we can make big changes and that we set ourselves up, for when we start a rebuilding process. We start a big rebuilding process in this country. I think that the genetics or that cumulative impact that really make a long-term impact that we can have by just selecting different genetics and having somebody sometimes come in your herd and saying, hey, be honest with people. Why are you using this bull? Or hey, your calves are not doing this. Or, I used to always enjoy when I was a county agent. I would go to the coffee shops in the morning and listen to producers, after they got their cellborn checks or before they bought new bulls, and just to listen to them talk about, those needs. And I think that, we're all like that. And I think we can make those type of improvements. And then when I think we can compound the efficiency when we start looking at outside genetics. But I think most herds and most situations, when they combine all three, I think they've got better success. But that number one, I think, still goes back to management.
Yes, sir. Well, thank you, Dr. Mask. I sure hope the listeners learned something about how they can increase reproductive efficiency in their operation, because it truly is the baseline to be profitable as a cow-calf producer. Well, I hope you learned something from this episode of the Cattle Innovation Station podcast. And if you did, make sure to share it with somebody so they can gain the knowledge that you have as well. And make sure to follow on whatever streaming platform you're listening on. And until next time, keep innovating the cattle industry. Signing off.